WVTC Radio Detroit. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, X, and our website, www.wvtcdetroit.com, or download our WVTC app from the Play Store for Android users and the App Store for iPhone users.
Do not pass me by. Do not pass me by.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to My Sister, Your Sister, where connection, conversation, and Christ come together. We're coming to you live every third Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on the award-winning station WVTC Detroit. Now let's dive deep into sisterhood, spirituality, and subjects that matter.
Pass me not, oh gentle Savior. Hear my humble cry. While others thou art calling.
Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tamara Fontaine Hardy, and we are here again for another My Sister, Your Sister podcast and broadcast. We are so happy that you have chosen to join us tonight. As you will see, we are missing two of our members, but we've invited some additional individuals to come. Some guests, our special guests are here with us. Before we move forward, though, I'm going to give it over to Randy, and she's going to introduce our guests. But before we do that, we want to extend the invitation to you. Please, 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 please feel free to go into the chat to introduce yourselves and to ask questions. We have a very timely conversation this evening. We're going to be talking about the upcoming vote, particularly in the city of Detroit, and some other topics around the ballot initiatives. We'll be talking about voter apathy and just talking about how we as people can share and spread our votes so that we can make a difference in our communities. We're seeing a decrease in voters coming out, which is having a huge impact on legislators, which is having a huge impact on what we're seeing happening in our community. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to dive deep into what's happening in the city of Detroit, and not just Detroit, but in Michigan and then throughout the USA. So let's talk about it. But before I do that, hey, Michelle Johnson
Hi,
and Nikki
Michelle.
Jones, we miss
Shout
you
out to Nikki
today.
and Michelle.
Yes, and with that, you want to take it over? I can talk a lot.
Sure. I'm going to introduce our guests for this evening. I'm just going to read a couple bios. I'm going to read the whole bio so you get a good feel of who we got in the building tonight. Jamila Martin, as a state advisor, Jamila helps craft a winning funding strategy in Michigan. She spends time getting to know the many organization groups across the state, learning about their work, their strengths, and their challenges. Where our movement needs more organizing capacity, Jamila encourages and supports existing groups to begin or increase their electoral work. She also looks for opportunities to improve the organizing ecosystem through collaboration with groups or other funders on special projects. This looks like a quote. It's really a pleasure and a privilege to get the bird's eye view of the hard work of thousands of organizers and member leaders. Before coming to Movement Voter Project, Jamila was an organizer for about 15 years, first as a campus organizer, then with SEIU, and then as an education-focused community organizer. Together with many other partners, Jamila helped found 482 Forward, an education organizing network in Detroit, and was a co-director until 2019. She's proud to be a part of successful campaigns to repeal punitive school closure legislation and to restore hundreds of millions of dollars in funding to the local school district. She currently lives in Hamtramck, Michigan, and has a passion for pizza and her tiny senior dogs. Please welcome Jamila Martin. Jamila, you want to say something to the people?
One of those dogs died. So now I have
Oh.
one senior tiny dog and one kind of young tiny dog. But besides that, hello to the people. Can't wait to have this conversation.
Yes.
Very good.
As a grandmother of 4 little ones, I applaud you because I don't have them in my presence, but taking care of little ones is like taking care of little children. So I applaud you, and I love my little fur babies.
Yeah, they're mostly
Yes.
just sleep all day. They're really,
Like little, like babies, right?
We also have some testosterone in the building tonight. Shout out to Brandon Snyder. Shout out to you out there. Brandon is the former executive director of Detroit Action. He was born and raised on Detroit's East Side. My husband will enjoy that.
Appreciate that.
Shout out to the East Side, West Side, the best side. Okay. To a working class union family, Brandon has been involved in faith, electoral, and community organizing projects throughout the United States for over 10 years. He recently stepped down as the executive director of Detroit Action. Previously, Brandon was the deputy organizing director in charge of youth voting for the Hillary for Michigan 2016 presidential campaign, the deputy campaign manager for the groundbreaking Gilchrist for Detroit City Clerk campaign, as well as the statewide director of organizing for Michigan United. You see that? Brandon's commitment to democracy and racial justice is fueled in great part by his experiences as a Detroiter and that of other Detroiters who have endured poverty and the criminal justice system. He believes in the power of bringing our communities together and challenging leaders to go from victims to victors by engaging the systems and policies that impact our lives. It sounds like a pastor, don't it? Victims to victors. Please welcome
that right
Mr.
there.
Brandon Snyder.
Welcome.
Say a little something to the people, Brandon.
Oh, what up? What up? You know, so I was joking and I was saying like, where you find this bio? Because this is a pretty new one. Because recently, my role at Detroit Action. So,
Okay.
Yeah, this is a pretty
Very
pretty
good.
bio.
Yeah, we stay
We
current
got
here.
people
Yeah.
in high places.
Yeah. So let's just talk about this. There's a lot going on in Detroit, in Michigan, in states across the U.S. There's a lot going on with the political scene. We know that we have an election coming up in just, 3 short weeks? And we have 2 candidates. And we don't necessarily hear, we're not for one candidate against the other. But we do believe that the individuals who are voting, the people who are voting, and those who maybe have stepped back from voting, trying to get them back at that table, you got to be a part of the conversation. I always tell my folks, you can't get wet if you don't get in the water. So don't complain if something's not going right if you didn't get out there to do something about it, right? But there's a lot going on in Michigan and Detroit. So can you, Jamila, you or Brendan, you want to tell us about what's happening in the city of Detroit? We know that our mayor's up for election. Duggan has been with us, I think, for 10, 12 years?
12 years.
12 years. And there's a lot of conversation whether he did a good job, a great job. I'm not here for that. We can see that he's done something, right? But we have 2 candidates right now, Kinloch and Sheffield, that are vying for that seat. And then we have a couple of the council member seats that are up as well. Let's talk about that and talk about why it's important that people show up and vote in Detroit right now.
Well, Brandon, when you were director of Detroit Action, you all had a number of policies that you were trying to get implemented at the city level that you took before city council and the mayor. So I'm curious if you want to walk people. I think often people don't vote, like you brought up this point about apathy, because it's not really clear how it affects me day to day.
Correct.
And so I'm curious if you want to talk about some of the kinds of policies that you all brought before a city council.
That's a nice way to slide me and say you go first. This is an expert move. This is why she is an expert. I appreciate that. That is media training right there. So, you know, like Jamila mentioned, I used to lead an organization called Detroit Action. It's made up of working class Black and brown Detroiters. So when we talk about working class, you know, we mean, you know, people who are tenants and renters, people who've been homeless, formerly incarcerated, people who are, you know, working, you know, minimum wage jobs or service industry jobs, I should say, and as well as young people. So that was our coalition of individuals, door to door, talk to people about the issues and policies that they care about, and really, you know, trying to develop leaders to do something about it. And I think one of the challenges that you always hear, like, I know Jamila, heard this a lot working with parents and students, is that the system is too insurmountable. I can't do anything. And, why vote? Why bother? Like, I've been
Mhm.
beat down by the system time and time
Mhm.
again. And a lot of the work that we do at Detroit Action, at 44, at Moses, where I know you're a board member of,
Mhm.
is about empowering people to become leaders in their communities,
Yes.
to be able to become change agents, but not just being, like how how media and how, are, and so many folks think of voters as like, come only in November and get involved. And this is the only time we're going to talk about the things that matter in the community, but actually, how do we engage 365?
Yes.
So we, to the point, we try to engage with policy. We try to talk to people about the issues that matter to them. We try to
Mhm.
elevate and center their stories in the conversations. A lot of the stories that we wanted to elevate and lift up of regular working class folks was about, tenant protections. And
Mhm.
what do we do about the foreclosure crisis? Where
Mhm.
people have lost their homes and they're due to, not just bank foreclosures from 2008, but property tax foreclosures that happened in Detroit, in
Yes.
waves after 2008. And and then and not just, okay, here are these poor folks, go
Mhm.
vote, but like, what do you want to do? What are the policies that would
Yes.
actually improve your life, and how do you have a hand in shaping those policies? So I think, like, when we talk about democracy,
Mhm.
apathy is down. Like, there's erosion of trust of the of institutions as a whole.
Mhm. I
And when we
agree.
talk about, so that leads to this, like, people not wanting to vote, not wanting to engage in the civic process at all. But we actually have to talk about, like, democracy as a full-throated thing of not just like elections, but actual
Yes.
365 process where elections are a comma in a sentence and not a period.
That's good. That's good. So where do we start? Because you see that there has been a pulling back. What are you all doing as organizers, right?
Mhm.
What are you doing right now to bring the information to the people so that they can see that there is a place for them at the table? Because a lot of people feel there's no place for them at the table, that what they are concerned about no longer matters. They see everything that's going on in the world. They see, you know, you don't know who to trust, you know? That's in Detroit as well. That's in every city, right? You don't know who to trust. Detroiters have talked about for years, what about us? We see that what's happening in the city center, but what about what's happening in the community? You talked about the rents and how high the rents have gone. There's been water challenges in the city of Detroit. There's a lot of challenges that we've seen, flooding issues in the
Mhm.
city of Detroit. High, what is it, car insurance? I mean, so many. We can go on and on and on. What are you doing, or how can people get involved again? I'm seeing when I go online that there are a lot of young people who are like, okay, we're ready to get involved because you old folks that messed it up, right?
Mhm.
That's what they're saying. They're saying, the older generation, you failed us to some degree because, Martin Luther King was out there. Our family, our grandparents marched for this right. What happened? What happened where you saw this pulling back where people decided, I don't want to do this anymore? Every man, woman, and child for themselves.
You got
That's
no,
a,
you got
ah, okay. I think a lot of things happened. Something that I am particularly focused on
Hmm.
that I think happened is that a handful of people got very rich
Mm,
and used that money to capture a lot of the levers of power
yes.
and
in
erode 'em.
our
Yeah.
world,
Mm,
and then used those levers of power to make themselves even richer and
mhm,
to make the rest of us struggle more and more and more. And I think that because that happened
mhm,
while people were still voting,
mhm,
people were still going to the polls, and they were being offered 2 choices, they were making choices, but the general erosion of people's, like, quality of life, the continued accumulation of wealth and power by a few, like, it happened, frankly, like, honestly, no matter who was in charge, no
mhm,
matter who they elected, that people started to, I think, rightfully and objectively, like, honestly, truthfully, they started to back out because it wasn't making a difference, or it wasn't clear that it was
Yeah.
changing people's lives. And I will like an example I give, which people may not like, is that I moved to Detroit in 2010, at the beginning of 2010, end of 2009.
Okay.
So this was Obama.
Yes.
Detroit was struggling,
It was struggling.
really struggling at that time.
Yes, I agree.
And I think
that was at the like middle of the economic downturn. That was
Yes.
2008, where we saw
yes,
where a lot of the foreclosures and people
Right. When was the
started
bankruptcy.
bankruptcy,
Mhm.
saw exiting.
Yeah,
A lot of
that
people
was a little bit
exit.
later.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, a
Yeah.
little bit later, but you did see a lot of people starting to exit the city, and you saw it downgrading, and just it was pretty scary for
Yeah.
citizens in the city of Detroit. It
Yeah.
really was.
And I think if I was somebody who had gone out, who had voted for Obama, who had knocked doors, who had gotten my family
Mhm.
engaged, and then this was
Mhm.
what was happening to the city, and it continued really for the rest of his term,
Mhm.
I'm gonna like have a reasonable response of like, maybe this isn't all that. You know what I mean? Maybe
Yeah.
this isn't worth it. And especially, and this is maybe even more controversial, but like if you're gonna bail out all the banks and
Yeah.
not real
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
And that
Mhm.
is what happened. And so I think for me, I think that we have allowed a few rich people to take control of everything,
Mm.
all the parties. And so I'm very focused on reducing inequality, driving that money back into real people's pockets and
Mhm.
communities, and also limiting the way that we can use money to influence politics.
Mm.
And so I think that that is imperative, like is necessary if we want people to engage in democracy in the way that Brandon is talking about. If we want people to do democracy like a verb again,
Mhm.
we have to we got to get rid of these like people can't be that rich and money cannot buy you politicians anymore.
But it's still happening. Let's talk about democracy, because the way you're describing it, I'm not to say that people don't know what the word means, but I do believe that there are people out there who say, okay, what kind of democracy is this? Is this my mother's democracy? Because I think that it shifts depending on what age you are.
Mhm.
And I'm a baby boomer. So you guys are not.
Yeah.
Right behind.
Yeah, little bit. But does it shift depending on if you're millennial or you're Generation X, and how does democracy look depending on what age group you fall in? What?
As like a black man, it's kind of challenging to say like democracy in the United States because, some would argue like we as black folks have never really experienced democracy in the United States.
Yeah.
Like, with segregation in the South, with, segregation in the North, we've actually experienced like what, folks are talking about would be fascism,
Yes.
where,
Mhm.
the corporations, business, police force, et cetera, all conspire against, people. And so I think that so that's one thing to consider, like when we talk about democracy. What is a
Yes.
democracy? And I think that like, people's realization, expectations of what democracy is, haven't really been met. We talk as the United States a really big game, but that quote from Dr. King about like, we got a check that has come back insufficient is really people's real expectations. Is that what this democracy is promised on the Bill of Rights, what this democracy is promised, in all these speeches hasn't been delivered.
Yes.
And I think that's true for, for the people that, you or I know, people who be listening and watching, is that this isn't, we haven't experienced the democracy fully and full-throated. We've experienced portions of it. Now, let me get now. I don't want somebody in the comments to be like, "Well, our democracy is better than pre-1994 South Africa." Like that. I mean, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Be
Yes.
reasonable.
And we actually are getting the stuff that we expected or being told. Like, it is actually not a place where you can actually fully engage. Like, we have Citizens United, we have all these things where they say that, like corporations, freedom of speech is actually way more than yours because of how much money they have. So we actually have to like talk about and come together and actually decide what type of democracy we want. And that's like the benefit of like the work that Jamil is doing around ballot initiatives, around participatory democracy, where we're trying to get people engaged in policy and then actually, doing the work to try to either restore or invent new levers of power, because a lot of the power, again, levers of power that were promised or were normalized don't exist.
Yeah, there's this promise of democracy, but it never really took shape for people of color,
Yeah.
right? And so, whose democracy are we chasing after? There's their democracy, there's our democracy, and then there's democracy from us. So, Jamila, in the work that you're doing, particularly with the ballot initiatives, how do you change, or how do you get individuals involved so that they can see that there is room for them at the table? Because if they believe that nothing's going to shift by
Yeah.
their presence,
Yeah.
how do you change that perspective, particularly when it's something that just didn't start, it came from their parents because their parents said, I don't know why you're going to do this, nothing's going to change, right? So how do you work with individuals and get them to the table? What do you say to individuals when they say, why should I vote? It's not going to make a difference. I've been voting for the last 5 years, for the last 20 years, and I haven't seen anything change in my bank account,
Yeah.
or my house is still falling apart, or, I got
Yeah.
fired because of this, whatever the
Mhm.
case may be. How do you bring them to the table?
Yeah. So we are actually, we're trying to give people more reasons to vote in some ways.
Mhm.
And we're trying to change the systems that make it so that no matter who you vote for, you kind of end up with the same thing. So the first is we are using what are ballot initiatives.
Okay.
So it's direct democracy. So Michigan has a very cool process where citizens can make the laws themselves. We don't have to go through the legislature. It is challenging, but it's a way that we can make the laws ourselves. And so what you have to do is you have to collect a certain number of signatures of registered voters saying that they want a particular proposal to be put on a ballot. And then if you get that number of signatures, then that proposal actually goes to the voters and the voters get to vote on it. And then either becomes law or doesn't, just through voting. So this is how we did nonpartisan redistricting.
Mhm.
So we got rid of gerrymandering in 2018. This is how we expanded voting rights to do all the no excuse absentee, et cetera.
Mhm.
And so we are working now on 2 ballot initiatives. One to fund public schools by taxing millionaires, and one to get corporate money out of politics. So specifically to ban campaign contributions from utilities and government contractors. So companies like DTE, Consumers, Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Okay.
And the way we're doing that is through regular people actually going out and collecting the signatures themselves. So talking to their friends, talking to their family, talking to their churches,
Mhm.
making this pitch about what they're trying to do, and join me, and take a little bit of a risk by
Yeah.
signing this thing and doing it yourself.
So don't ignore the people in Kroger in the parking lot with the little.
Well, ignore some of
Ignore
that.
some-
Actually,
Yeah.
actually, yeah. So there are the people at Kroger specifically are trying to roll back voting rights.
Really?
So I
Talk about that.
highly recommend.
Because I shop at
boy.
Kroger. Do I need to boycott?
It's not
It's not
Kroger.
just Kroger. It's not just Kroger. Yeah.
Well,
They
somebody will
Kroger.
say that though. Someone
Yes.
will say, wait a minute, I shop at Kroger. You mean to tell me they're trying to roll it back? Because and I know that there's an agenda for a certain narrative.
Yes.
And that narrative is spoken very loudly and it drives the conversation. And so, how do you? I want you to talk about the education, because we know that at the federal level, they're trying to dismantle the education department. And from a statewide, if they're trying to dismantle education at the federal level, and we're talking about having the 1% cover a tax so that we can increase our educational opportunities for those that are in very low income schools. Some of them don't have books. I used to be a teacher back in the day.
Yeah.
I went to school to be a teacher, and I would go into some of the schools during my pre-student teaching and my student teaching, right? And some of the schools didn't have the library books were
Yeah.
old. Some of them didn't have open libraries.
Yeah.
Let's just talk
Well,
about
most of the libraries are shuttered
Are
down.
sh-
They don't
shuttered-
have
shuttered.
librarians. Yeah.
And exactly. And so if there's one agenda at the federal level, and then there's an agenda at the state level. How does that work?
I mean, that's a big part of the reason why we're doing it. So they essentially have shuttered the Department of Education at this point, at the federal level. So, last week they fired the entire special education
Yes.
department that no longer exists in the Department of Ed. And, there's going to be more and more and more cuts. They've already proposed another $250 million in cuts just to Michigan for next year from the federal budget. Like, this is going to get worse, and every state needs to start thinking about how it's going to protect its residents from what the federal government is doing.
I read today that the special education is going to be transitioned to health and human. Did I read that?
Yeah, that was today. They wanna
HHS?
move it out of the Department of Education
Yes.
just to HHS.
But mostly they just want to get rid of the federal
Yeah.
government.
They want.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
they just wanna get rid of it.
Jamila made a point just a little while ago about, over the last 50 years, there's been a concerted effort of the wealthiest people in the United States thinking about how can they enrich themselves, but also how can they consolidate power. Their like rallying cry has been like, we want to, shrink government, so that way we can drown in the bathtub, so small we can drown in the bathtub. And I think that when you think about that, yeah, it sounds cute, but it also means that what are the impacts that happen to actually regular everyday families
Yes.
when your healthcare is no more, when your the support that you have for your children is no more, and when they try to use Black and brown folks as the target of why these things are bad and why we should get rid of them. So I think one of the things that we do, just going back to your point about education, is also it's putting the policy in people's hands to make it. But then it's also trying to elect leaders who, come from our communities, who will stand up for things, and who actually, who will fight on policy. So the new role that I have in my life is, I'm leading a thing called the Michigan Working Families Party. It's a part of a national community organization that, as our executive director says, attempts to be a non-delusional third party. And what that means is we aren't trying to play spoiler. We're not trying to be Ross Perot. We're trying to instead, be able to challenge and elevate issues and elevate stories, and also be a political party and be a political machine that's owned by community groups, that's owned by labor unions, but actually runs on, inspires people to be engaged in politics instead of being disengaged. When you look at the last election in 2024, well, let me take a step back. White men have been, haven't voted for Democratic Party, in the majority since LBJ in the 60s, right? Yeah. And across the board, since then, definitely over the last election, the Democratic Party has been leaking, working class people across all races. So for us, when we talk about what does it mean to be able to inspire people, it's actually giving people something to vote for, giving people something to actually improve their pocketbooks, giving them something to actually be able to be inspired by, and giving them a home to actually be a part of, instead of saying you are the problem, you shouldn't be here, and actually give them solutions to say that you can do this, instead of saying the problem and the solution is those other people that you got to support. So we actually have to do a lot of work on the education side.
Yes.
Again, not just to tell people the Schoolhouse Rock how a bill becomes a law, but also what power you do have, and also who's to blame.
So we can't talk about bills on Capitol Hill anymore.
There really are no bills on Capitol Hill.
Definitely not right now. Yeah.
I don't think anybody watched Schoolhouse Rock anymore, but it was. So when you talk about the impact, because I don't think people understand. First of all, the ballot initiatives that you have out, until I was made aware of them, I didn't know about them. And so how do we get the message out to the citizens, whether it be Detroit, in Detroit, how do you get that out? And is that across the state of Michigan,
It's
right?
statewide.
So if it's statewide, why haven't I heard?
These are statewide initiatives. They both launched in the past 2 months. So they are relatively new.
Okay, so that makes me feel better. A little bit.
So they are relatively new. But I mean, this is how, honestly, we need to do more. We need as many people as possible these are entirely volunteer run campaigns and initiatives. So we have regular people going to their PTAs and
Mhm.
presenting. We have people going to
Having the
their school
conversations,
boards,
yeah.
presenting, like really like block by block. So, if you're watching this,
Mhm.
you
No,
let me know.
definitely.
We really need you. And it's podcasts like these, it's radio shows, it's different folks who are on TikTok or
Mhm.
Instagram
Mhm.
that we're trying to get the word out,
Mhm.
and talk about what's going on. And I think honestly, our initiatives are one of many things that I wish were getting more coverage, but I think that like there's an overload of like we were talking about this earlier,
Mhm.
kind of kooky information that's coming
Mhm.
at
Yes.
folks and not a lot of great information that's coming through the different social media channels. So we all need to kind of like step up our game. I mean, I think that was a big
Mhm.
lesson from the last election
I agree with
is
that.
that like we are not great at getting our messages out there.
Mhm.
We're not great at having people on TikTok. We're not great at having people on Instagram and do all the things. Like I know I hate it. And I think it
Same.
kind of
Do-
plays, I hate it. You know, you know. But I think that like there's something about having, I mean, honestly, I think it's something about having our values
Yeah.
that we have
Yeah.
like very collective and community-based values where the
Yeah.
idea of like being in the spotlight
Yeah.
is
And I would say like take party affiliation off of it. Like,
Yes.
what I mean is like people who care about justice, who care about equity, all these
Mhm.
things, diversity, all the things that like there's a side that is against that.
Mhm.
Like we actually have to do a significantly better job talking about the benefits and
Yes.
also about the fact that like there are like common collective goods that are under attack, all for the purpose of that someone wants to sell it back to us.
Let's go there. Let's talk about the benefits because I think that we hear too much about what didn't happen and why it didn't happen, and there's a lot of blaming and shaming going around. It's with the Democratic Party, with every party, there's blaming and shaming going around as to who's to blame for this not happening. But let's talk about the benefits because I don't think people hear enough about it. We want to get people to the table and we want them to know that their voice counts. Then we need to tell them by coming to the table, this is what we're going to see because we know that there's an erosion with the family, there's an erosion in our politics, across the board, we're seeing that erosion. So what are some of the benefits or what are the benefits of people getting engaged?
one thing I want to say that I was like remembering I wanted to point out, which is I'm gonna say it in a negative way because
Okay.
it's something we've lost, but it would be a benefit if folks
Okay.
engage, is that
Mhm.
since this administration took power, 300,000 Black women have lost their jobs.
Yes, that is so true.
And this was like a one-day headline in the New York Times. This needs to be an everyday headline. Like, I think we have to talk about this every single day.
I wish there was something I could put on my Facebook page so
Yeah.
there's that moniker that said so that it's always in
Yeah.
people's face. How do we
Yeah.
keep it in because it's happening and it's still happening.
Yeah. The add on to that, like the erosion of Black wealth for like the suburbs of DC, like
Mhm.
many of our communities, comes from like government jobs and people having those sort of positions, in the federal government, and all of that has been eroded. So like all your friends who are from PG County and Maryland, all your friends who are from the Northern Virginia suburbs, or DC that are Black folks, like that wealth that was created from Black families, has been eroded and been stripped away from all these cuts. So like the tax, that's one of the things that came out in a report from AFGE, the federal government employees, was that like these cuts are attacking Black wealth and Black workers, and like those are the types of things that we also have to be able to elevate. That like it's not just I want to shrink the size of government; it's like I want to remove a specific type of worker.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I mean, it was entirely intentional. I think like we have spent the last 100 years
Mhm.
clawing our way
Mhm.
into using the federal government as a mechanism
Yes.
for equity,
Mhm.
whether it's through Supreme Court decisions or through the creation of the Department of
Yes.
Education or through the EEOC or through the civil rights divisions. Like all of this, we have spent 100 years plus
Yes.
like fighting for the federal government and the state governments to be tools that we could actually use to lift oppression
Mhm.
through HUD, et cetera. And that is why they've spent they never said, oh, this is because we want to roll back civil rights. We want to go back to, frankly, like slave times.
Yes.
They just said, oh, government. so bad.
Well, they
Tech-
use DEI.
Right.
They
Yeah.
used DEI and they turned it from something that was positive into something that was negative so that it could erode the Black worker
but
to
even
some degree.
But even
Yeah.
one of the executive orders that came out from Trump, repealing LBJ's
Mhm.
ban on discrimination in
Yes.
federal hiring, they didn't have diversity in there at all. It was about like don't discriminate against when we hiring, and they removed that under this like, oh, it's a woke policy. So
Yeah.
so we have to actually think about like, how are we talking about that? You
Yes.
said on your Facebook page, like we actually need to be doing more of these podcasts, more of these TikToks, more of these conversations to be able to elevate this, because somebody's going to stumble upon it.
Yes.
Somebody's going to like get it. And I rather have news that's factual that can be sourced to an article than like, somebody, in a basement,
news.
pulling off
So much
AI.
fake
Yeah,
news.
yeah. So much fake news. Yeah. So
So
much
much
fake
fake
news.
news.
And that's what I said when we were waiting. We have to get on AI because if we don't, it's going to be inaccurate information as well. And so for folks to say, oh, I'm not going to use that tool, well, then you're also doing a disservice
Yeah.
because people use it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, back in the day, YouTube, everybody was like, oh, that's fake. No.
Right.
But now people go to it as a trusted
As a
source.
source. Yeah.
And so we see TikTok. And people like, you don't want to go to TikTok, but that's where all our kids are going.
Yeah.
And they're gathering their information from there. So if the data isn't correct, if the narrative is being shifted, then it's going to take us to reshift that narrative to what's true.
Yeah.
And I don't see enough of us doing that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're in the position that we're in now is because one party's voice was louder than the others.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I'm so like, props to you guys for doing this. I could not. I truly could not. But we need all.
So you
We are
actually doing it.
doing it, but you guys are like, you do it every week or whatever. No, I mean, honestly, I hate to say it, but like, yeah, we need more of these podcasts. Like, we need more people out there talking about this, talking about the benefits, talking about the hundreds of thousands of Black women who had jobs, who had won the jobs that they deserved, and who have now had those taken away. We also need people doing the really hard work that Brandon mentioned earlier about helping people work through the thought process about who has made this choice that has left me where I am. And so specifically, I was actually at one of your events.
Oh.
I know your events when you're talking to your members. This was a Detroit Action event last year.
Mhm.
There were two folks there, both older Black people, a gentleman and a woman. I can't remember what the session was on. I think it was on the DDA, Downtown Development Authority. But somehow we were talking about, I don't know how it came up, but they started talking about Southwest Detroit, started talking about Latinos in Southwest, and started talking about how, somehow they always get their houses fixed up faster. And somehow there must have been some money that was given to them because their house, they lived across the street. The family moved in. They bought an old house that had been maybe abandoned, run down, and all of a sudden, was fully renovated. And there's a conversation you have to have with people that takes time so that they're not just assuming that it's this brown person next to me, right? It's this other poor person. They must be the reason why I'm not getting what I deserve.
Exactly.
And that is a long, hard conversation that we have to have with people and putting them at who actually is putting them in a position where you're not getting paid what you deserve. You're not getting access to the jobs that you deserve. And it's probably not your next door neighbor who's the one that made that choice.
I always say that if people don't know the truth, they'll make up their own story. And if they don't know, and people are, I hate to say this, people can sometimes be a little lazy in that they don't want to go and do their own research. They rather take what you say and that becomes their narrative. So they will scream loud a lie, they will scream loud a lie. Let's get back to talking about the impact and some of the benefits of getting it. Because again, we have 2 elections coming up, right?
Yep.
We have your ballot initiatives and then we have our mayor, and then city council. That's going to help shape. I read something, I think it was this morning, talking about Duggan and all the stuff and all the positive things that he had done or some of because there's been a lot of money that's come into Detroit.
Yeah.
Let's just make that clear.
Mhm.
You can't say that there's not there. Whoever comes in will have to have a strategy for bringing that money, keeping that money, and bringing in new money. I often hear people say, "What about the neighborhoods? How?" So people coming out to vote, that's something that they need to be concerned about. But what are some of the other things that could be on the table for individuals in the city of Detroit that they should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's too also like one of the things that we'll have to like really think about with our next mayor is taxes and
Mhm.
also like we're coming out of bankruptcy and a lot of those deals are like due.
Mm.
So like we actually got to think of and couple that with what we just talked about, like all the federal cuts. So
Yes.
states and cities are getting fewer and fewer dollars. How do we make sure that we get those city services? How do we make sure that we get those things that we need without going back to the days of when Jamila first moved here? When it was
Yes,
austerity,
we don't want that.
So we actually got to
Yeah.
be thinking about like having a mayor, not just a candidate, but a
Mhm.
mayor who is actually thinking about like how do I provide city services? How do
Mhm.
I create new services? How do I do the justice work without like doing this, austerity, ruling by a spreadsheet, trying to rob Peter to pay Paul and Peter and Paul right here,
Yeah.
and so I think that's one key thing to think about. The other is that, you know, we are also, whatever you want to say about that, whatever. I have a lot of takes. I'm not going to offer any of them right now. And I would say that there are, the next mayor has to be thoughtful about like how are you bringing people in?
Community
How are you,
voice.
yeah. How are you bringing community in? What's the voice? How are you bringing people who have experience in? How are you adding new voices? How are you doing
Mhm.
all those things? And that's a thing that I think a lot of groups are, trying to be present and at the table about around like
Mhm.
how do we make sure that like voices are heard and it's not, instead of the people that, the next mayor hollers at is like, okay, billionaire A, B, C, and D, and like those are the people who are the only people making decisions. So those are like I think the key things that like folks have to be thinking about is like what do you
Mhm.
want your next mayor to do? We know that we're a city that has a housing crisis just like the rest of the country. We know
Yes.
that we're a city that has needs around public safety.
Mhm.
Like the rest of the country. We know that we're a city that has health concerns like the rest of the country. Like how do we want to make sure that the next mayor is equipped and thinking, but also has your voice and has the voices of the institutions, the communities, the neighborhoods that you represent, actively being filtered through their policy.
That's good.
Do you guys get a sense that there are people, well, there's always going to be people on the fence, one candidate versus another. But do you get a sense that there are people who are like on the fence or are not going to cast a ballot? Like, yeah, because that
Yeah.
always happens, like when Hillary and Trump were running that first time and the emails came out, oh my gosh, I'm not voting for that. She had
Mhm.
deleted emails. And so we're not going to vote at all. And so,
the
what is the impact of just choosing not to
To
vote?
vote. Yes.
Well, okay, I would say, I'm not sure if there's a lot of impact. I'm going to say one, you'll say others. Okay. One thing I will say, and this is very like inside baseball, but I think it is important, is that if you do not vote, what happens is that every year when candidates run, they pull a list of everybody who voted last year, and that's who they try to talk to.
Mm.
So they don't,
Never knew that.
candidate campaigns do not bother to try to get people to vote who have not voted.
Okay.
What they focus on doing is trying to persuade people to vote for them who are regular voters.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you do not vote, what happens is
Yeah.
that candidate will not call you. They
Mm.
will not send anybody to your door, and they will not try to find out what your opinion is or
Mhm.
what you care about when they decide their platform.
Okay.
They build their platform and their
off of
agenda
current voters.
off of only the people who voted like probably multiple times, like
Mhm.
2 or 3 or 4 times in the
Mhm.
past, say 5 elections. And then all they do is talk to those people. So when you stop voting, you basically take yourself out of the process of being listened to. That's just how the candidate campaigns work.
Yeah.
That's important to note because basically, I hate to say it this way, but you become part of the problem
Yeah.
because you take a step back, and because of that, not only are you diminishing your voice, now you've allowed someone else to diminish your
Yeah.
voice.
Mhm.
But then that also impacts like neighborhoods and constituencies
Mhm.
too. So like if let's say Black folks are voting for me,
Yeah.
then I'm not going to represent you when I'm elected because I'm playing to my base to actively be, to actively try to get reelected. The name of the game at this point is legislate enough so I can be reelected. Like it's a job review. So you want to so I think when we talk about not voting and like following those systems and those cycles, like you said, you are taking yourself out of the process, but then you also aren't at the table to be able to get the things that your community wants. And then I think there is a lot to be said about um like the work of elections, like Jamila mentioned, how people decide on who's a voter, who isn't a voter, who's a worthy voter, all that type of stuff. I think the thing that I want to like make sure we lift up is that candidates are thirsty when it comes to like getting out and votes, but they're also strategic because it's a game of like time and money. So we actually have to make ourselves appealing. We have to engage them, and we actually have to make them earn our votes. Both in local races, but also in our statewide races. When we think about the city council races, one of the city council races, in District 7, was won by 56 votes. That's that's a matter of 50. If one more person would have showed up, or one fewer person would have showed up, or excuse me, 50, show up, it would have made a difference. So I think those are things that just to bear in mind. When we talk about Trump in 2016, he won by 11,000 votes across the state.
Yeah.
And so that's, you could find 11,000 people.
Yes, definitely.
One vote per person.
I mean,
Yeah.
exactly, because that caused us to turn red
Yeah.
as opposed. We do have a question, and if we can, the question was, there we go. I was told if you get the high schooler to vote in their first 2 elections, you have a voter for life. However, if they do not vote their first 2 elections, you will chase them to vote forever. Do we go to the schools to let them know the importance of voting like they did in my generation? And so
That's a
that would be my
great
same
question.
generation, I believe.
Great
The
question.
boomers
The
are
boomers,
yeah.
yeah, the boomers are out there.
There are organizations like 482 Forward, like Detroit Action, like My Student Dream, and a number of other organizations around the city, around the state that engage young people in elections and trying to make sure they cast their first vote. I think that's just a side of like I'm not a high schooler either, so like, but so I think it's important that we are actually considering that like as a population that has wants and needs, and making sure that they're able to say those things, and like it requires people to do the work to make sure that candidates see them as important, but also that we're educating them and giving them a platform to be able to express those wants and needs. So I don't disagree with that question. It just requires adults to make sure that we are creating the pathways and opportunities in the space for young people to take action.
Absolutely. We take our kids to vote with us every time. From
My
the
kids are
stroller,
grown.
push them in the stroller. We're
Yeah.
gonna watch what we're doing,
Yes.
all of the things. So yeah, we're grooming them.
I grew
early.
up going to the ballot.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. With
Yep.
the lever.
Yes.
Where-
Yes.
Yeah.
The one thing I am
Yeah.
seeing is if we sort of wind down, I am seeing a lot of younger voices, like Adam, I don't know his last name, white guy who's on CNN, who's coming out really strong. Have you seen him? White guy who
No.
he's really good.
Okay.
And I'm seeing some other individuals who are challenging the narratives right now, and they're coming out and they're saying that's not true. They're chasing and they're saying you have to be accountable for the lies that you're telling. Jamil, I think that you need to get on there and be that
Okay.
voice. I think there's a
Oh,
call.
God.
I feel like there's a call.
Yeah.
Yes, I feel in my spirit, man, that there's a call to action, right? And that call to action is because let me tell you, you don't know how many people that you have who have listened to this podcast that will say, wow, I didn't know.
Mhm.
I didn't know that they only chased individuals who had voted. No
Mhm.
wonder I'm not getting anything in the mail.
Right.
No wonder I don't get called to do the surveys, because you remember they do the surveys. 1 out of 10 people said that
Mhm.
Trump is doing let's
Mhm.
say 9 out of 10 people say that our federal government is doing a great job and he's getting huge approval rates.
Right.
But that's
Right.
because he's going to his base.
Right. Right.
Because they don't know the other people's names because they're
Right.
not
Mhm.
voting. And so we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to give both you, Jamila, and Brendan the last say about what needs to happen and what's the call to action.
Well, my call to action is to go to Invest in My Kids,
Invest in My-
mikids.org, and sign up today to be part of our statewide movement to fund our schools, to tax the top 1%, and to get money out of politics so that we can make Michigan work for regular people again, not just the wealthy few. So sign up. We will call you. I see you're already on the website.
I'm on the website.
Effective call to action.
I love
Yes.
it.
I love
Sign
that.
up. And I would say that will be the best way for you to get involved in any of the things that we're talking about, whether it's engaging in like city council elections. The groups that are working on that initiative are across the state. They are organizing for local elections in addition to statewide. So you can get plugged into anything you want to do
Okay.
if you sign up there.
Do you come to local ministries and talk about this? Because
Yeah.
I would say that at different churches, and the saints need to vote too. And I don't know
Yes,
how much
absolutely.
they're out there, exercising that democratic vote so do you come and do you visit and do you talk about it?
We do. So as part of the coalition has a number of faith-based groups
Okay.
that are part of it. So for example, Moses
Mhm.
is based here in Detroit. Metro Detroit, I should say. They're a faith-based organization that's part of our coalition. Detroit Jews for Justice, also part of our coalition. In other parts of the state, there are other faith-based coalitions, other traditions that are all part of the state. And so their work within our coalition is to go to those congregations and have those
So
conversations.
this ain't just a black thing. Let's just put
That's
it out
right,
there.
that's
This is a people thing.
This is a people
This
thing.
is a people
This
thing.
is a people thing. And it has to be. I mean, if we want to win, this has to be a people thing across
Absolutely.
all of Michigan.
Exactly. What happens
Absolutely.
to one affects the other, right?
Absolutely.
And then Brendan, what about you?
Yeah, maybe if you want candidates that actually care about, getting money out of politics or investing in kids, and, taxing billionaires and, funding public education, or maybe you want to be a candidate yourself that carries those justice values, you should follow the Working Families Party. So our national page is www.workingfamilies.org. And then you'll be able to click at the top states and you'll see Michigan, and you can get updated and follow us, as we're working on city council races, state legislature races, the congressionals. But then also we want to be able to train dozens and dozens and dozens of people to run for office. And maybe you don't want to be in front of the camera. Maybe you don't like being on podcasts. Maybe you don't like being in front. It's fine. We want to be able to have people who look like us, who come from our backgrounds, who are faith-based, etc., run campaigns, be working on communications, to be the people who are working on finance, raising the money. All of the things we need to actually be able to take ownership of.
I love that. I love that.
One thing I just want to connect is so I know the audience, this, a lot of folks who go to church and are faith, and it'd be like, man, it's progressive, whatever. Maybe. And I want to say that one of my good colleagues, Nicholas O'Rourke, is the city council member for Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and he's a WFP candidate. So he runs on his values, all the things that were taught in the Bible around how do you treat your neighbor, how do you treat the community around you, and how do you actually be representation of Christ. And so those are the type of people that we want to actually pull into the community, into our movement.
You all hear that?
That's incredible.
I love that. And I love the fact that years ago, I don't know if they still do, NAACP used to train, and they would train youth on getting into and how to, if they were interested in public office. So that's what your organization is doing. I think we need to talk about that some more. So would you guys be interested in coming back at some point to talk some more about the work that you're doing? Because I love that. We're about to turn Jamila into a podcast.
Going to have her own
You're so
segment.
funny. We will stand it.
Yes.
No, you are part of the family now. So we would love to have you come back because it doesn't end with next month, City Detroit.
It's ongoing work.
We have what is it? Not our governor's race next year, and that's going to be huge.
Yep. Along with all the congressional seats.
The congressional seats are up. Yeah.
All of our
everything
is up in the House in Lansing. So it's important to be tuned in and be able to listen and be able to actually interrogate some of these elected officials.
I love that word. Let's interrogate some people because they show up and interrogating us. So with that, it has been a phenomenal conversation. I've enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you for coming. We are the My Sister, Your Sister podcast, and thank you for helping us to share the love, but also share information about why it's important to vote and sharing with us those ballot initiatives that we need to be focused on, particularly the one around education and around, again, the 1%, having them to cover that cost because we know our funding is going to be decreased a great deal. So thank you so very much. And with that, we will be signing off for now. We welcome you to come back and listen to this podcast again. Thank you for joining My Sister, Your Sister podcast.
See you next month.
Bye.
Well, that's a wrap on another episode of My Sister, Your Sister. Now, don't keep this to yourself. Tell a sister or a brother and join us next month on the third Tuesday
at 8 p.m. Eastern
on WVTC Detroit. Stay in touch with us via email at sistersllc@gmail.com and partner with us via Cash App at $MSYSCOMM. Peace out.
Hi, I'm Judge Craig Strong, and I love listening to WVTC Detroit.
Okay.
You ain't changing your mind now, have you?
We're about to be one big happy family.
I'm just hoping I can trust you to return my love.
I mean, as much as I know how to love.
Did you sleep with him?
No!
This is toxic.
Don't become the thing that hurt you.
And what is that?
Bitterness.
I really needed you when Daddy died.
Girl, look, there you go with what you need. This not about you. Didn't you find God for that? I'm not here to meet your needs.
I understand that you love her. I get it. But like this, right here, this is toxic. Toxic? Man, who's you talking to like that?
And we're here at the Davidson High School for the first game of the season.
Look, I'm sorry, sir, but we will all run it for our lives.
Hope you enjoy being used, man. Man, what?
No. You better find someone else to play with, bro.
Come right. You both know you ain't about to hit nothing but a high note. You better sit down.
My Bible tells me that the wages of sin is death.
That's wages, honey, not wedges.
I know what this says, Miss Sunday School teacher.
I see that one is coming to the altar.
Now is the time.
Singing and praying with my mind.
Cut.
How you gonna cut singing and praying?
This is WVTC Detroit, your award-winning gospel internet radio station. We're bringing you the best in gospel music, live shows, and inspiring interviews. Like and share our page on Facebook and YouTube. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay connected. Your support helps us spread positivity and encouragement throughout the community. So whether you download our WVTC app, visit our website at WVTCDetroit.com, or join us on Facebook or YouTube, you will stay connected and entertained. Join our WVTC Detroit listener family today and tell your friends about us. Together, we can make a difference. WVTC Detroit, where gospel meets the community. Go to your Apple or Google Play Store and download the WVTC Gospel Radio app today. You can also say, Alexa, play WVTC Radio Skills.
Would you like to play WVTC Radio Network?
Absolutely. Download it today.
You're listening to WVTC Gospel Radio Detroit, and we're flowing in the Spirit.